By now, something inside you has shifted. You're no longer just a beginner uploading random edits. You've seen the system react. You felt that first wave of uncertainty, and now every clip you drag into your timeline carries a different weight, because you've realized that this isn't just about creativity anymore, it's about control, ownership, and perception. And the moment you begin editing, there's a silent question running in the background. Is this enough? Or is this still too close to the original? And that question becomes the difference between guessing and understanding. What most creators don't talk about openly is that fair use isn't just about rules, it's about interpretation, and interpretation varies depending on context, presentation, and intent, which means there's no exact formula you can follow step by step and guarantee safety. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes this space feel unstable for beginners. Because you're not just learning editing, you're learning how your content will be judged by systems and people who don't see your effort, only your output. And this is where the concept of transformation becomes deeper than most realize. Because it's not just about adding commentary or cutting clips differently, it's about changing the experience of the content. The reason someone is watching, the value they're getting, and the way they interpret what they're seeing. Because if your audience is still primarily engaged with the original footage rather than your input, then no matter how polished your edits are, the transformation remains weak. Think of it like this. If someone could remove your voice, your edits, your perspective, and the video still works almost the same, then your contribution wasn't strong enough. But if removing your input completely changes or even breaks the video, then you've done something meaningful, something that shifts ownership of the experience from the original creator to you, and that's the kind of transformation that starts to align more closely with fair use principles. But here's where things get even more layered. Not all content behaves the same way. Some clips are highly sensitive, like movie scenes, music videos, or viral moments that are instantly recognizable, and these carry a higher risk because they're easier for systems to detect and for owners to claim. While other types of content, like generic footage or less prominent material, may not trigger the same level of response. And understanding this difference helps you make smarter decisions before you even begin editing. There's also a subtle trap that many creators fall into: overconfidence after early success, because sometimes a video with reused content doesn't get claimed, and that creates a false sense of security, making you believe your method is safe, but in reality, it may have simply gone unnoticed, and building a strategy on "it worked once" is one of the fastest ways to run into problems later, because consistency in this space comes from understanding, not luck. And then comes the idea of pacing and structure, something that seems unrelated at first but actually plays a huge role, because how you present reused content affects how it's perceived. Long uninterrupted clips can feel like replacement, while shorter, well-integrated segments combined with your input create a different rhythm, one that emphasizes your presence rather than the original footage. And that subtle difference can influence both audience perception and system evaluation. Another layer that often gets ignored is the emotional tone of your content. Because fair use isn't just about information, it's also about intent. And content that critiques, analyzes, or transforms tends to carry a different intent than content that simply showcases or replays. And while intent alone doesn't guarantee safety, it contributes to how your content is interpreted when reviewed, especially in cases where human judgment becomes part of the process. And as you continue to learn, you begin to notice patterns. Which types of videos tend to get claimed more often? Which formats feel safer? Which approaches create stronger transformation? And slowly, your workflow evolves. Not just in terms of editing, but in terms of thinking, because now you're planning your content with awareness, considering not just what looks engaging, but what makes sense within the boundaries you're working in. This is also the stage where many creators face a critical choice, whether to rely heavily on existing content or start building more original elements into their work. And while reuse can be powerful when done correctly, over-reliance creates dependency, and dependency increases risk, which is why the most sustainable creators gradually shift toward a balance, using external clips as support rather than foundation. And there's something else that changes. Your respect for content itself, because once you understand how ownership works, how systems detect and respond, how effort alone doesn't define rights, you begin to see other creators differently. Not just as sources of content, but as individuals who built something valuable, something protected. And that perspective naturally influences how you approach reuse, making you more intentional, more careful, more strategic. Because at this point, the journey is no longer about avoiding mistakes, it's about building a system of your own. A way of creating that aligns with both your goals and the environment you're operating in. And that's where real growth happens. Not in shortcuts, not in hacks, but in understanding. Because once you truly understand the mechanics behind fair use, the fear starts to fade. replaced by something much more powerful: control. And in that control lies the real advantage, because while most beginners are still guessing, still copying blindly, still hoping their videos survive, you're now thinking differently, creating differently, and moving with purpose. And that difference may not be visible at first, but over time, it becomes the reason your content lasts, while others quietly disappear.